Okay, well, I guess we'll get started. My name is Carrie Burgess, and I'm with the Saskatchewan Tourism Education Council, Department of Tourism Saskatchewan, also known as STEC. I'm very excited to welcome Eva Gutsche, who is going to be our presenter today. Eva Gutsche is the owner of STEM Consulting and is a seasoned tourism professional with over 19 years of facilitation experience, working with Canadian tourism operators, DMOs, and PMOs. STEM has been helping tourism operators adjust to changing situations from SARS, global travel safety concerns, economic downturns, and overall shifts in consumer demand, and now COVID-19. So we are very thrilled to be teaming up with Eva to present Ramping Up as the Curve Flattens, Adapting Your Business for Summer 2020. And I will hand it over to Eva.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Carrie. So nice to be here, and thank you to all of you for joining us. So we'll jump right in. This is going to be recorded, so you can go back afterwards, share it with others. Carrie's going to help me with the questions, so she's going to be monitoring the questions, and if you have any, pop them in. Nice free flow. We've got a smaller group today, so lots of opportunity to jump in and really take the information and make it yours, and ask questions specific to your business. That works, and we'll dive in, and we'll pause every so often and make sure that everyone's got what they need, and if there's any questions that you may have. So, but as we're going through the workshop today, we want you to consider some of the unique experiences in your region, and how they, by perhaps combining them or showcasing them, how they can really add to what you offer. And then we also want to consider your best fit short haul Saskatchewan customer for this summer. So it's very much a local focus. So we're gonna really talk about kind of what's happening from an operational standpoint, and then look at it from a marketing standpoint. So how can you really drive some business for right now when we all need it? So what we're going to cover here really is looking at the current situation. So what's happening out there, what's changing, and then really how to adapt. And we're always living in a state of change, but I think the last 3 months have been unprecedented. Things are changing constantly. It's tough to stay on top of it, and your business, how you operate, will not be the same for quite some time. So let's take a look and see what's happening out there. Yeah, I found this comment. It was in a industry journal, and I thought it really kind of put everything together very easily to kind of get a grasp of what's happening out there. So coronavirus became the perfect storm. So it's really a combination of that fear factor that we had after September 11th, and this time on a global scale, the financial impact of the 2009 recession, but amplified. And then really what we've never seen before is this widespread of border closures. And of course, the US border for us is a big deal. And we put all this together, and it's had such an incredible, massive impact on the world in general, but certainly on the tourism industry. And so your reopening is well underway in Saskatchewan. Things are happening, businesses are opening. It's the rules of engagement are a little bit different. And so some of the changes, I'm sure you're putting them into place, or you've got them into place. I want to take a look and see what some other industries have done. And we've got this interesting situation where all of a sudden now health and safety, not only is it a big part of your operation, it's become a marketing tool. And we'll take a look at how some companies are now using that to position themselves as the safest place to be. So this is where you're at. So yesterday, your pools and rinks opened, performing arts, capacity limits removed for restaurants. You got a little bit more happening this week and next week. So I've been doing, as Carrie mentioned, I've been doing these workshops across the country, and a little envious because you've got so many things already open and running. And you've also got an opportunity where others are looking at you and seeing what you're doing and how you're doing it. Because the world, some aspects or places in the world open sooner, we've also got a chance to see how that's working. So I'm going to share a little bit of that with you today. So the self-isolation, of course, if you've come from outside of Canada, it's mandatory. Close contact with anyone that's been exposed, of course, but you don't have the self-isolation mandatory coming in from other areas. So that's a good thing for you, unless, of course, that you're showing symptoms, or you're showing symptoms and going to be around, still very much at risk. And so when we look at what's happening in Canada, so 3 to 5 stage approaches. Of course, the inbound for all of Canada, but we've also got some provincial borders still closed. So Atlantic Canada has bubbled, but they're closed off to the rest of the country. And when we start looking at, self-isolation rules in provinces and closed borders, it ends up, you've got the local market to go after this summer, but you will have the Canadian market as well. So, people may have planned something to Atlantic Canada, and they're now looking at other places. Of course, there's going to be the restrictions, and I know you've heard so much about these, and we're all living them. And I think the reality is the measures could be in place for a long time, till that vaccine is available. And now, as we're looking at predictions of when borders are going to open, I think originally we thought, well, the fall, and now that's not so clear. Many businesses are, of course, meeting all the criteria that they need. It's a lot of extra time and work and money to put that into place. Other businesses are also adding an additional layer. So they're saying, I'm going to meet you here, and then I'm going to top you. I'm going to top and position myself as the cleanest and safest. So globally, it was interesting when I started, the research, what I'm finding too, I've been running this, a similar webinar to this for some time, but the data changes every time I deliver it. And so even looking this morning, trying to figure out in Europe, who can travel and where can you travel? So some of the countries are open, but they've got a list of who's not allowed in. Or you've got a situation that you have to show health certificates upon arrival. Some of the countries are testing you upon arrival, and if you're clear, you're good to go. So lots of, a whole mix of different rules as countries are opening and trying, of course, to keep their country safe. The temperature checks, more and more we're seeing that. I had my first experience with that last week. We got to have massages, and so I was very excited to book a massage, and the first thing that happened was, of course, the temperature check, and it's not optional, it's mandatory. Some grocery stores are actually doing that as well, so very interesting. And so we've got the whole technology piece now starting to layer onto this. So looking at the contact tracing and, who have you been physically beside somebody who's tested positive. And so even if the technology is not in place, businesses are doing this. So, and we'll talk about that. If you end up with a situation where someone was in your business and they were ill, how are you going to work with that? And so we're going to look at that whole communication piece. And so when it's always interesting with, regardless if it was SARS or September 11th or the economic recession, there's some businesses that thrived during crisis. And we've had the same thing here. So I don't know how many of you have actually painted your home since COVID entered our lives. I've got Carrie waving a hand there. If in-home workout products, cleaning supply companies. So, they're having a very good year. The furniture and product home deliveries. So lots happening out there, businesses that are actually doing well. And then when we start looking at, tourism and recreation, so we're going to look at the recreation, how that falls into tourism. So one of the things that's happened, RV sales are up. They're up in Canada and the US. Retailers are citing up to 35% increase from last year. So the RV companies are pretty happy. And it's showing too that people want to get out of their homes. They want to get out of their homes, they want to get outdoors, but they want to be safe. And so this is very, in an RV, you get to control that. You get to control that environment. So that was part of the reason that there has been this big surge. The other one is bikes. So there's a short, this is actually around the world. So there's a shortage of bicycles. Again, people wanting to, you know, that recreation, their gyms may have been closed or still closed. The sports that they play, you know, squash and some, you know, we've got across the country different rules. Some places you can play singles tennis, some places you can't. So you can, or you can play doubles, but you can't in other places. So that real desire to get outside. So a shortage of bicycles. And then we start looking at cottage and cabin rentals. So a big increase as well, and probably similar to the mentality of the RV. So I'm going to rent this place. It's going to be easy for me to keep it clean and to manage that environment. So up 300% compared to the previous year. And what's happening as well is that the length of stay has increased. So people are willing to drive further, so that's something that's happened as well. But if I'm going to drive further, I'm going to stay a little longer. So that's great if you've got accommodation, particularly if you've got cabin lodge kind of accommodation, that's in demand. So that's great news. And so when we're finding the tourism trends overall, there's a really concerted effort nationally and provincially to keep residents in Canada and really keep them, start with your respective province first, or in the case of Atlantic Canada, now your region. And the political leaders are reinforcing this. We've got, you know, locals campaigns. We've got Destination Canada, you know, as the umbrella for tourism, saying stay, you know, support Canadian businesses, be safe, stay in Canada. And so when I started looking at, you know, what's happening as far as some of the trends for the Google searches, so it was really interesting. So let me share those with you. So we've got, the keywords I put in was camping. So you're going to see this is a year picture. So there's been a big spike happening into June and beyond. So great news, again, reinforcing that people want to get outside and would like to somehow control that environment. And travel in general. So we're seeing, you know, big spikes, and it's up and down, but it's certainly a big increase. So great news, people are thinking about travel and thinking about staying local. So great for local businesses. So let's, I've got a poll here for you. Thank you, Carrie. So who has seen a recent increase in inquiries from the Saskatchewan market? So I put yes and not yet. So assuming that you're going to get them, we'll keep it very positive there. So if you can just pop that in. And you know, what we're seeing across the country is, you know, the last few weeks, there's been a fairly big surge of people, you know, wanting to travel. And those people that have planned that trip, you know they go to Europe. And this year they're not going to Europe. So looking at different options. So how do we do with the poll there, Carrie? Do we get some responses back?
Yeah, we're 50-50 right now.
50-50, okay, fantastic. So that's great. So for those of you that have already started enjoying that, there we go. Thank you so much. That's great. And those that haven't, you know, now taking a look at it going, okay, what can I do to actually capture that market? How do I, you know, how do I inspire people in the province to get out and support local businesses, travel within the province and enjoy the province? So thank you. And what we've got happening as well, you know, which the welcome mat's not necessarily rolled out nationally. So in some places, I'm going to use the Atlantic Canada bubble there. They've closed at this point. They don't want the travelers and visitors from outside the 4 provinces. And so we've got that situation as well. Had I planned to go to Atlantic Canada, I might be looking at other parts of Canada to enjoy this summer. And so we're really, you know, the reinforcement there to enjoy local hospitality. And so when we're seeing the trends, there's an interest in you know, the outdoors and enjoying all the great things you have in the province. Local residents are likely going to travel Saskatchewan this summer. We know the US market is out. And so if you are dependent on the US market and you haven't started shifting, it's probably a good time to do that. Doesn't look, you know, as we're as we've looked what's happened in other places of the world, things had to, the number of cases has to flatten first before, things are going to open up, and that's not quite there yet. We also know that the mode of transportation is mainly drive. Flights are starting to open up, but there is still some resistance for people would feel at this point, feel safer in their car if they can drive. So an opportunity there as well, because you are looking more local. And so let's take a look at, some of the things you need to consider from an operational standpoint. So I'm going to focus on 4. We've probably got a few others in there, but the hygiene and sanitation for sure, and the guest and staff safety. And the training, you've trained your staff, but the training needs have changed because the roles have changed and the interaction some of the tactical steps of what your staff now need to do in order to keep your business safe, and then how you communicate that. So that's going to be critical, and the communication overall. And so we'll talk about many of the new standards, and then really want to make sure that you don't get cases in your business. It's detrimental. It's an awful thing that someone gets sick. That's number one. But the impact it will have on your business is also something you want to absolutely avoid. And then looking at the soft skills and the tactical, and then communication. So the way you communicated with your guests in advance of preparing them, be that confirming a dinner reservation or selling them a ticket to an attraction or booking their accommodation, you're going to need more information from you now. And updates on what's happening. And so please check your provincial site. I'm sure you've done it already. And so the guests will want to know, so part of it, you need to put these measures into place, but your guests want to know what they are. So as they're traveling, is this going to be safe? You may have had experience yourself where you went into different businesses and you felt some had actually taken the protocols and the standards to a higher level than another place. And may have impacted whether you went back to that business or not, or how you felt about that. And some of the products that the guests may need. So when we're starting to look at what's happening across the country, so we don't have provincial and national mask rules. We certainly have municipal. So that's something that's changing. I'm in the Ontario. I'm in Ontario. That's where I'm coming to you from this afternoon. And masks are mandatory in all our businesses as of this morning, whenever you're inside. And so if you're going to have visitors from other places, they may have expectations based on what's happening in their own cities or their own communities or regions. So that, that need for them to understand, what are the hygiene protocols. And then a traffic plan for the high traffic areas. So when you start taking a look at that, you probably, what gets touched the most in your business? So is it that pen at the front desk? Is it the door handle when they come in? What are things you can do to minimize touch? And the guidelines are really the minimum. So this is the bare minimum. And then what are you choosing to do over and above that? So I have the Air Canada example. So they've changed this as well. So Air Canada's Clean Care program, some of it changed at the end of June. It was a little tighter actually when they first opened up, but the temperature checks are mandatory. The products, so we're looking at what products you may have available for your customers that you normally wouldn't carry. You probably normally wouldn't carry hand sanitizer, but this is something that you may choose to have available. It doesn't mean you have to give it away. It can certainly be for sale. The electrostatic cabin spraying, so the whole grooming procedures. So Air Canada did a really good job laying this out in their website. They've changed what you're going to eat and drink on flight, and masks are mandatory. And so this is where they're saying we've taken all these measures. They came out early with them. They came out, quite extensive, saying we are safe. Come fly with us. And I had a couple of hotel examples here, and I thought, it's really interesting what's happening in there as well. So some of the new rules, or roles actually. So one of the big branded hotel companies, by the end of September, each one of their hotels will have a hygiene manager. So something that did not exist last year. Really, look, this whole technology piece. So what can I do? What can I do to minimize touch points? So we've certainly seen people tapping their card more than ever. You know, businesses preferring that you don't use cash, or stating, you know, no cash, we don't take cash anymore. You know, with the smartphones, using it to bypass the front desk and check in automatically. With some interesting partnerships. So we've seen partnerships with chemical companies, the companies that make Lysol, you know, one big hotel brand partnered with them. Here's one with the Mayo Clinic. So saying I'm, you know, a medical company going to get advice there. And so, and the training piece. So if you own the business, you've probably got a little more control over it. Or if it's a franchise, you're having to really inspire and educate the owners of that business to meet the standards of the brand. So the whole training piece has really changed. So here are the kind of some examples, and they're using it as a differentiator, saying we're the only one that have this high-tech electrostatic sprayers and hospital-grade disinfectant. You would never have seen that marketing last year, right? And so this is, you know, now all of a sudden I'm going to take, you know, a cleaning standard, and I'm going to position myself stronger than everybody else. So let's take a look here. So what do you, we can do this in the chat function. So what do you anticipate to be your biggest challenge with the new health and safety and hygiene standards? So if I can get a little dialogue from you, I'm going to continue on, and then I'll go back and Carrie and I will check that. And so one of the things that you know, mentioned earlier, you don't want anybody getting sick for so many reasons. And so how are you going to screen, and what are some of the measures that you're going to put into place? I just saw 4 in here. Let me just check the chat function. So hi, Tina. So we've got in here customer expectation and security fears. So that's one of it. Yeah, that would be a really important one. So, you know, if that's what I'm considering to be my biggest concern, I'm going to, you know, what I'm going to put in place will be quite different. Cost is a concern for our business in the warehouse district. Okay. I don't know, help me out with a little bit there. So, you know, what are is it the cost of cleaning? So what are the costs that are actually a concern? But your costs will probably go up. A challenge to keep the high contact points clean. The elevator buttons, absolutely. You know, how are you going to work with that? And how, you know, what are you going to do to ensure that there aren't 6 people on the elevator, right? Because that's just not going to work for physical distancing. So we want to take a look, and we're going to talk about the physical distancing, but we want to take a look at those high touch point areas. Is there a way to keep the door open so not everybody's touching it? You know, when this first happened, I was at one of the big box hardware stores, probably buying paint like everybody else. And it was so interesting because they were still trying to figure out how do we do this. And it was a curbside pickup. And so they had the pens in envelopes, so you could sign for your pickup order, and then they threw every pen out. Well, that's not really, it's not really sustainable. You know, is there a way that you can, you know, what can you do from a signature standpoint that's going to, you know, have the safety aspect? And then, you know, some of the environmental aspects have slipped a little bit because we're packaging everything up differently. We've got in here, some avoids the cost for PPE and sanitizer cleaner are high. And yeah, and of course it has been budgeted for. So yes, so you've got those. So what we are seeing nationally and globally is that some are putting an extra cost. You know, there's getting a haircut, for example. And so there's an extra $4 fee for cleaning. You know, and when you look at the business, they have all these increased cleaning costs, and they have less people sitting in chairs. And so how do you consider, how do I want to roll that out? Do I want to identify that as, you know, an additional surcharge? Do I just put it, you know, do I just have a price increase in general to cover some of that off? Are there ways that I can, you know, get revenue in other ways to offset some of that? But, you know, really great point. So thank you, Dee, for that. Absolutely. And Christine for the high touch area, high touch points. And so, you know, the questions, I've got a Q&A one in here as well. Biggest challenge will be keeping up with the cleaning of rooms in between guests who don't, as we don't clean them immediately when the guest checks out for safety reasons. Yeah, and that's a really good point. So many of the, it's been ranging from 24 hours to 72 hours. 24 hours seems to be more the norm. And so what you're seeing in some of the hotels is that there's no cleaning while the person is on property. So if you would like towels or you would like anything brought to your room, that's left for you outside your room. And then the big clean happens when they check out. So when you're looking at that, there's a couple of things you'll want to do from a marketing standpoint. You want the guests to stay longer. Because if you have to, if you've got one night stays, it's going to be very labor and cost intensive. So how can I manage that? Some of the other things that we've seen in the hotels is everything that you're used to seeing in that room. A lot of the things, not the bed's still there, but a lot of the other stuff is taken out. So that coffee maker is taken out, the ice bucket, the wine glasses, some of the magazines and the reading material in the room, and now it's on a request basis. So trying to avoid what you're touching in that room and the excessive cleaning that's required when you have all these touch points. And so, will you have a questionnaire in advance? What questions are you going to ask? There's lots of great examples out there. And the same for the staff. So I may want one for my customers. Some of these are done verbally. Sometimes it's sent in advance that you're doing it on a computer screen. The handing out paper, not a lot of paper being handed out from a hygiene standpoint as well. Also, how are you going to monitor staff health? So how are you going to, ask them each time they come to work to ensure that they're healthy? So that's a consideration. And what happens if a guest falls ill at your business? So you discover that you've got, you've got a small restaurant, and the guest calls you 2 days later and says, I've been diagnosed. And how are you going to communicate that to everyone else? So that you want to have that in place well in advance. I had just something like that happen to me. I was at a drugstore and I was using one of the loyalty cards. And so that's how they were actually able to tell that I was in the store that day. So everyone that had been in the store, and one of the staff was diagnosed. And so anyone that had been there while that staff person was working, within a 2-week period, got a note saying, full disclosure, we're letting you know that this happened. So maybe be a little more aware of any of your health symptoms. Luckily, nothing happened, so that was great. But it was as a consumer looking at that, I felt they really have my best interest at heart, because that's not good news to share with somebody. So how are you going to share that news? And then what happens if a team member gets sick? Right? How are you going to let your customers know and the other team members? So this becomes a pretty critical piece of managing the overall health safety of your guests and your staff. The contact tracing, and so in restaurants, they're asking for all your contact information in order to absolutely contact you should there be a problem. And so the group size, so we already had the example of the elevator. So how do you, and that's when you're looking at some larger cities in Canada, they can't get all the employees up the elevators in order for them to actually go to the office. This is a huge consideration at this point. And so trying to stagger it, trying to have only half capacity, and it's really about trying to get people to the 45th floor because they can't be done. Or they're going to be spending, an hour and a half waiting for an elevator. And so how, you know, when you start looking at it, how does it impact your business? So you've got a B&B, and it's, you know, perhaps it's been kind of a free-flowing approach for breakfast, and you've got a nice little continental breakfast set up. Well, first off, now it's kind of, you know, having all that food exposed is probably not a good thing. So how are you going to package that differently? And how are you going to ensure that, you know, not everybody's in the breakfast room at the same time? And, you know, maybe using, hopefully with great weather, it's kind of, maybe it's a to-go breakfast and they can go out and sit in the grounds. Is there other things that you can do? Can you bring it to the room? So really taking a look at, you know, what times is there going to be a challenge of having people converge in one area and not allow for the 2 meter space. And so really kind of doing a good assessment of your business now. So is it the elevator? Is it before they're going to get on it's a boat trip? So, you know, maybe everybody stood down by the dock before. Well, that's not going to work now. So you're going to maybe have to separate families and have people in different pods, have some space in between. And so really, how are you going to adapt to accommodate this? And the communication piece here, communication is always critical. Right now, there's so much more needed. So the advanced communication to staff and guests what to expect. So if you are going to come on this walking tour, this adventure, this is how it will look differently this year. And we're not going to pick everybody up in a van because we can't have all these people sitting together. So we're going to meet at this spot. So how are you going to work that? And how are you going to communicate that in advance? And then guidelines for the guests while they're at your place of business. So back to the B&B, you know, are you going to, you know, once that room where people can normally go and read, you know, maybe once there's 4 people in there, it's at capacity, or you can only come, you know, people each get a turn so you can come down for an hour. So, you know, it's really logistically, this is it's so intense, but you want to do it now as you're, you know, starting to ramp up versus being surprised when all of a sudden your business opens and kind of go, oh, I've got a problem. I've got everybody in this room together. And what to bring. So it might be different. You know, the options if they would like to bring hand sanitizer or things like that. Is it readily available? It's starting to be much more readily available. You know, so what are some of the things that might look different? And then the pre-screening, if you have, you know, it's going to be an online questionnaire, whatever that's going to look like, or you're going to give them a call, but you'll probably want to do some sort of pre-screening. And then assisting the staff with communicating the new reality. So some people are really good at taking direction, and some people might be irritated by it. So, you know, when they're told now they can't sit there where they would like to normally sit, or you have to keep so many feet apart, and as a result, we're going to rearrange things. How do your staff communicate that in such a way that everybody's okay with it? And that leads us to the training. So the process is probably the easier part to train on. So saying that this needs to, each time someone touches the keypad on the Interact machine, you need to wipe that down. That's pretty straightforward. What may not be as straightforward is if you've got, you know, people are used to hugging their guests or handshaking, keeping the distance, and really ensuring that the guests adhere to the guidelines in order to keep the other guests safe, themselves safe, and your team. So lots to think about here. Hopefully that wasn't too overwhelming. So we need to, you know, what resources are available. I really encourage you to go onto the provincial sites. It's really well done how the information is laid out there. So you've got the hygiene and sanitation, the communication, the training, and the guest and staff safety. So lots of work to be done. And so now so we've taken a look here at kind of what's happening globally, nationally, and in your province. And the next piece here, then we've taken a look at some of the things, the operational considerations for health and safety that need to be considered and everything that taps into or ties into that. And now it's really about finding some business for summer 2020. And about half of you had said that you've already seen an increase in inquiries, which is fantastic. So we're going to look at community partners, best fit, consider the COVID guidelines when you're starting to develop some new experiences and product for summer 2020. You know, you may want them to stay a little longer, particularly if you're an accommodator. And so what are they going to do? You have to tie in some experiences and activities for them. And now also consider that, yes, you're going to have a space issue at mealtime. So how can you now fill that? And then looking at marketing your offering. So with travel still restricted in many places, summer vacations this year are going to happen close to home for millions of people. So we're certainly seeing that in Canada. We're seeing it around the world. And so I thought this was interesting. So this was in June, that 49% of Canadians are planning a day trip in the near future. So in June, people started, you know, getting out of the house and staying 100 kilometers or less from home. So you've got that market within 100 kilometers. And Destination Canada has certainly been planning for that. And so how do we redesign experience to travel locally and ideally stay for more than one night? And so that's the challenge to you here. So I wanted to include this one. Peter Mansbridge, I just really liked his message. So this was just July 2nd. And so, you know, his message is stay local, support struggling local businesses in the tourism industry. And so tourism, it employs 1 in 10 Canadians. And last year, Canadians spent $36 billion leaving Canada. So putting those tourism dollars in other countries. And so Peter invites Canadians to imagine the influence just half of that could have on the small businesses around Canada. So love that message. I hope lots of people see that message and that we support each other as we're coming out of this crisis. So wanted to get a sense here. Carrie's going to help me with this. Carrie's right on it. Thank you, Carrie. Who in the audience has created new experiences and travel packages geared at the Saskatchewan market for this summer? So if we can get a little handle on that, that would be fantastic. I've got people responding. Thank you so much for that. And if you haven't, that's okay. There's still some time. You know, and part of it, you can develop the experiences and packages, or you can just promote what you already have in your community differently to really entice people to come to the community and have your business as part of their overall experience. Okay, fantastic. Oh, so nice to see that. So 70%, so about 2/3, and 1/3 is still working on it. Okay, thank you. So what we can anticipate is, and some of this is already happening now as things are opening up, but when we look at what happened post-SARS and post-9/11, the drive distance went way up. And so that is likely going to happen again this summer. And focus on local and regional travel, as we mentioned. And the drive market, your drive market will be the first to respond. So if I know that, I can now go, okay, I'm going to go after a 2, 3, 4 hour drive, and that becomes my market. But I wanted a little more defined than that. So I've picked kind of a geographic region, and then I'm going to pick specifically what type of customers within that geographic region would work for me. And so the US, there's thought maybe later in 2020, some are not as optimistic. We're hearing, 2021, depending on what happens. If a vaccine shows up very quickly, everything changes. The international market, that's pretty clear. We're looking at 2021 for the international market. So this comes back to, taking a look at your business. If you have US business on the books, leading into, post the end of the month, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to contact them and see if, they want to hold on and wait? Chances are, though, if you wait and the border doesn't open, how are you going to be able to resell that spot on the boat or the attraction ticket or the accommodation? how is that going to work? And so this becomes really difficult. If you have a crystal ball, it's really handy. So you can kind of predict the future, but we really don't know. But you need to make decisions now based on that. So if I, or am I going to call up and say, why don't we rebook it for next year? Or let's go later into the fall because it's looking tricky. So I need to start being very strategic on what I already have booked and whether I feel that's going to materialize. So if you haven't contacted reservations for later in the summer and early fall, probably a good time just to have a conversation, get a handle on that. And so this whole kind of focus on local, a summer of discovery is in your own backyard. So exploring Saskatchewan. So I wanted to kind of take you through a 5-step process as you start looking at how am I going to develop new products and experiences for summer 2020. And so the first thing I want to do is, okay, I'm going to look at my business. I'm going to look at my business, and I'll give an example here. You've got a fishing lodge, okay? And you're maybe heavily, in the past you had quite a few Americans come up and enjoy that fishing lodge. And so now it's kind of going, okay, that's a problem. That's not happening. So when I look at this lodge, who else might it appeal to? What else might it be? So I want to start kind of looking at the product. Maybe it was intended for one market, but can I shift and use that infrastructure, use that destination to attract a different market? Then I want to really look at my best fit short-term customer, and then an overall industry inventory assessment. So what's in my community? Who can I partner with? I want to layer on, of course, the COVID-19 considerations. And then now I'm going to actually start putting some experiences and product together ready for market. And so the first one is, who might it appeal to? So what I have available is at the cottagers. So can I take a lodge and go after cottagers? Is there a way for me to shift that? When I'm looking at my business and I'm looking at the local market going, I'm really good with families. We've got lots of things already in place for the family market. Ideally, if they have younger children, we've got some programming, or I'm going to now look at hiring a summer student to run some children's kids programming. Is it younger couples or singles? Is it seniors? Or is it just people that want to get out of their house because they've been in their house for so long? Families reconnecting. So that's one of the things we're hearing. The first thing is I want to get together with the people that I haven't been able to be with. And that's great as well, because now you've got this unit that can travel together. So it helps you with the size restrictions. So, how if I'm looking at my business kind of from a COVID lens, but also from a marketing lens, who might be a good fit here? And then really understanding your customer. So your existing customer, so can they come back? Are there more of them? Are there more of them? Are there more hikers out there that you haven't gone after, or people that are into canoeing or the outdoors? And who is a potential new market for me? And then really now I'm into the inventory assessment. So that local story, the assets, so the favorite spot that you like to go to, the hidden treasures. So I'm going to look at, this place and looking at it, assuming that you're going to attract visitors from Saskatchewan that may not have been to your community before. So what do you have to tell them? What do you have to showcase to them? And if you're lacking some experiences, how can you create those quite quickly by working with what you have in the community and your partners? And so now it's kind of, looking at the needs of the new market. So I'm in a community, perhaps all the businesses that usually open have not yet. So they might be, but they're not open yet. And so are there enough activities? What about the food and beverage component? What will your travelers be doing during their stay? Is there enough for them to do? What are some things that you can quickly create? Well, we've got some good examples of that. And then really, how can you help the visitor really experience what you have? So how can you get them immersed in the overall community and the overall region or destination? And it's really now starting to look at experience providers in your community. And so doing an inventory of what you have, and maybe there's a way to innovate and repurpose. So you've got a space problem inside. Can you create a space area outside, or do you have another kind of outbuilding of some sort, or a great picnic area that you can set up? We want to take a look at layering and linking experiences. So if I create 3 or 4 mini experiences, and now the guest gets to experience those in one day, it's a pretty robust day. And they're pretty easy to put together. And really, taking advantage of that whole local flavor. So the gaps here are really, when I'm doing that inventory, so I want to do a list of what's open, but what is closed. And what are the anticipated open dates, or are the hours of operations have changed everywhere? So how is that now going to work? Particularly if I want to build some experiences around that. So I want to package to fill the gaps. So if there's a food and beverage lunchtime gap, then am I going to look at doing picnic lunches? So, and if I can't do them, can someone else do them for me? So how am I going to fill those product and service gaps? And so here's where we start looking at linking and layering some of the experiences. So even at your own business, so you've got some capacity and size restrictions. So you can't have everybody standing around at the same time. But is there a way that I could have, a little wine tasting going over in one part of the garden, and somewhere else we're sampling some local food, and somewhere else something else is happening? And now it's a rotation. So I've been able to keep everybody safe. What about curbside food tasting? A walk on the farm. So, when I look at the assets in my community, maybe I haven't looked at that as a tourism asset before, but is there a way to incorporate that? And if that museum is not open, it's unfortunate, but I can probably, maybe myself or someone on my team or someone at my community can still, share the history and share part of the culture by standing in front of the museum or taking me to other places in the community. That walk in the woods, if someone guides it, all of a sudden now it's a scavenger hunt, it's a foray, there's a chance to take photos, there's a chance to share some of that, even sharing your knowledge as a business owner. So doing quick talks of kind of how you got started, or what, there's something you make or do. Gathering, harvesting, and creating, is there a way to do that? When I look at, I can go into a restaurant and have a great meal. I love to do that, actually. So that's, I can do that. But, now if I find out, if the chef comes over and talks to me a little bit about what happened, or how he created this and what inspired him, and it was his great grandmother and this was her recipe, all of a sudden that experience has changed for me. If I actually got to cook the meal with the chef, it's changed even more. And if we went to the market together first, and he showed me which, he or she showed me which, items that they would purchase and why. So I've learned a little bit there. Now I've got this incredibly robust experience. And so is there a way that I can take what I currently have and turn it into something bigger, particularly if I've got an asset, challenge where, some of the things are closed. So I'm going to have to be really innovative and come up with some new ideas. And, it is challenging, and because you've got everything else to do in the business, but now you've got this unique experience, and maybe I can't get that anywhere else. And that's going to inspire someone to come to your business or your region instead of somewhere else. And I can do this by providing it on my own, but ideally I start partnering and collaborating with others. And part of it, we can build robust experiences and put it all together and package it. And that is a lot of work. I won't deny that, but we can also look at creating itineraries. So, very simple. Your community better than anyone else. And so where do they go to see that most incredible sunset? And where is there, a favorite shop or a local gallery that they really should stop in and see because they have this incredible X? So if you start putting the theme or the story together and, helping people and they can discover this on their own, you're going to give them the guide. And so providing, of course, why and why they're going to be wowed, and then the logistic aspect. Can you walk there? Do you need to drive there? What do you need to bring? Do you need to call in advance? And so once it's a little work initially, but you're going to be able to use this ideally all summer and really help. You don't have to have fixed costs, but some approximate costs are good to include. And the next one is referring. So there's some businesses that you find you have a similar philosophy, you're a good complement to one another, you work well together. And so can you now start encouraging your customers to go to see their business and vice versa? And if you're going after new markets, so now you're going after the family market, and maybe that hasn't been your market before, so you probably need some new partnerships. Because that family market's interested in different things than perhaps the fishing market or the outdoor adventure market. And you're going to share customers, and really you're going to help the customer access the other business, and they're going to do the same for you. So we've got the itineraries is kind of one step. The next step up is having these partnerships, and then it's really about building bundled travel experiences. So this is much more intense. Because there's one point of sale. So now you've got some cash dispersed. How are you going to price it? Who's going to collect the money? What are you going to do about credit card fees? What about insurance? You really have to know each other's business. There's, what happens if you've got this great outdoor experience? And I think, Carrie, you said you've got rain coming today. A storm brews up. Do you have a plan B? And how are you going to jointly sell it and market it? So this sometimes takes a little longer. Ideally, you move from the referral piece into, having a more formalized partnership. And then, that's in place for a while. And now you've got this really great, robust experience for your users. So when we take a look at this, what we talked about, it's really about attracting the visitor. So the type is best suited for your business. And understanding any gaps, so meaning that you're going to lose perhaps a certain market this summer. So what does that represent? And how much business do I need to attract in order to replace that? And then it's this inventory, this things to do and see. Again, the current gaps, what's closed, what's not working. You want to consider free and paid. And then what's the theme or the story? You've got such great stories in Saskatchewan and such rich history. So how do I leverage that into creating some really fantastic experiences? And then working with partners. So the itineraries, the referrals, and then a more robust package, and really inspiring what we want to do, inspire that local resident to visit. And the more you can define your target customer, the easier it's going to be to market to them. So the one thing that doesn't work, well, we're good for everybody, but that's going to be really hard. It's going to be really hard to market to that. But if you know that you're great for young families, perfect. So now you've got a chance to, really leverage the social media, look at other methods of marketing to really speak to that audience. And so when we start presenting the offer, and it was when I was first putting these workshops together, I had to really change some of the images. So the images should be, I've got COVID friendly. So having a group of 50 people in a picture right now is just not working. So with the ones here, we've got a family up there and a couple, and so really considering who you want the images, who you want to attract. The picture should be your customer. We want safe and clean and spacious, so people, look at that, and I feel good about it. I feel safe in there. And outside, we know outside, we've got this, we're at good timing for the summer. We know that the chance of contracting it outdoors is less than indoors. So let's promote the outdoors. And images of moving, healthy and happy, and helping the guest really envision a memorable experience. So you've got the options, of course, of your website. And for those of you that haven't had a chance yet to indicate your COVID policies, COVID practices on your website, probably a good idea. So this is what you're doing. This is what to expect. You now can't just show up. You need to make a reservation. It shows that you have taken time to think about this and that you are prepared and you are dealing with the pandemic in a responsible manner. So it says so many things. Certainly putting your new images up there, your new experiences up there, social media. And similar to the key, you know, when we start looking at the keyword search that I did at the beginning of the webinar. So what are the keywords that you want your customers to put in to find you? So, you know, we want you to be able to showcase what you have. So really giving that some thought, something you might be able to do on your own or get some help with. There's third parties, so cottage rental companies. Right now the demand's high, you might be able to do that on your own, but maybe your business has never really looked at that because you just had a different way of marketing. And then you're saying, you know, we could probably attract that market because we have cabins, for example. So now maybe using a third party to help you. OTAs, online travel agents, and then any of the traditional methods. And certainly encourage you to work with your provincial marketing organization. They're setting the stage by really inspiring Saskatchewan residents to travel Saskatchewan and working with your destination marketing organizations who are really trying to get the visitor to come to your city, your region, your town. And so just to recap here, we want to do an assessment of your product. So when I'm kind of looking at it perhaps differently, figuring out who your best short-term customer is, and doing an inventory assessment of what you have, experiences, activities, restaurants, local historic sites, outdoor spaces of what you have in your community. Any gaps, so any business gaps here, meaning closures due to COVID, temporary or longer, and then the partnering and collaborating. So you're stronger together and working together to really create something fantastic. So I thank you so much for spending your time with me this last hour, and myself and Carrie and the team at Tourism Saskatchewan. So I'm hoping that you were somehow inspired by something that happened, or you made a note going, I got to get on this right away. If you'd like to share that with others, that might help and inspire them as well. So what you need to do, or what you need to work on right away. So that's my last question for you. And I'll now, of course, take any questions that you have, and I'm going to pass it back to Carrie.
Sure. Thank you, Eva, very much. You got us thinking about how to adapt to the visitors' expectations in the shorter term, which is really important right now. Of course, the importance and the opportunity for partnerships, which is something that we can really benefit from in our province and in our communities. And you also got us thinking about ideas for showcasing our communities, you know, finding that unique story or experience that you can share with your local customers that maybe they don't know enough about. So thank you very much for sparking some ideas and for sharing your information with us today.
Great, thank you so much. Good. Is there any questions before we sign off? Oh, I think I might have one here. Oh, this was from earlier. Okay. Oh, I think I've got a couple in the chat here, Carrie. I'm just gonna. Yeah, I've got. So these are from earlier. So I'm hoping that you did get sparked with something that you're going to jump on and do right away. If you have any more, if you have any questions or want any additional information, very happy to take any questions. You can reach me, Carrie or I, and we'll get that information to you. Carrie, you want to tell them where they can access the webinar after the fact, the recording?
Sure, it will be posted on our YouTube channel, so we will email that link out to you directly, and we'll also be sharing it on a webpage connected to our industry site. So you'll get information about that through Industry Matters or because you registered for this webinar.
Great. Well, I wish you a successful summer 2020. It's going to be a different one. I hope that you have an opportunity to welcome lots of members of your community and your province to your business. Stay well, stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you again. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Take care.